Today, we're talking about a situation that's very, very common in chess. It's when you're attacking your opponent after they have castled. So, in this case, we can see black has castled kingside. White has brought some pieces over there, and it's a question of can they win the game and checkmate the king. Now, this is an extremely basic example, but we're going to see some more intermediate and even advanced examples towards the end of the game. And some of these patterns that you're going to see are going to be super helpful for your game. So make sure you make mental notes of these so that you can find them when they show up in your game. So in this game here, black plays the move queen to c3, which is a huge blunder. It's white to play. This one's pretty easy. What should white play? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is queen takes h7 checkmate. It's defended by the knight. The king can't go anywhere. Pretty basic. That's about as simple as it gets, okay? But this kind of just illustrates the idea. You have some pieces. You brought them close to the opponent's king, and you're looking for either a checkmate or a way to win some serious material, like if you can win your opponent's queen or maybe win their rook, something like that. Okay, but usually it's going to be checkmate. All right, let's go to the next example. So here's the situation, and white has just captured this pawn on d4. It's now our move with black. What should we play? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is knight to h3 check. And notice this bishop over here in the corner, which forces the king here. And then we can follow up with queen takes f2 checkmate. Now, this is an interesting position, and I want to point something out here. The reason that we know we should be looking for a checkmate on the king is because of the way that our pieces are set up. Okay, so certain situations, this is going to happen more often than others. So in this situation, look at these four pieces. The knight close to the king. We have two different checks. It's controlling the square on g2. The queen, pretty close to the king. It's lined up here. Maybe it can come over here. Both of our bishops lined up in the direction of the king. So when you find yourself in positions like this, where you have one, two, three, four pieces aimed at your opponent's king, especially if one of them is a queen, you really want to be paying attention to, do I have some sort of checkmate opportunity? See, a lot of people in this situation would think, oh, my queen's being attacked, I better move it. And you might get in this kind of defensive mindset instead of going for the checkmate. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right, so here we go. It's white to move, and they play queen takes g7. What move should you play here as black? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is queen to h4. And this is really, really common. Okay, when you can create a battery, that's when you have two long-range pieces lined up, a rook and a queen especially. When you can create a battery like this, it's almost impossible for your opponent to stop the threats that you get from that. Okay, it's very, very powerful. Now, in this case, you did have to calculate something. What's going to happen if your opponent puts you in check? Because they do have a check available. But in this case, we have a nice move here. If you'd like to pause, what should we play? Well, hopefully you didn't say king to d7. This is actually a big blunder because you step into the discover check, and after knight to f3 check, you actually lose your queen. But what we can do instead is knight to d8. We block off that check, and we still have the threat of checkmate over here. Now, it actually does get a little bit tricky because if white sacrifices the queen, we have to find one more good move here. What should we play? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, again, you don't want to take with the king because you're stepping into that discovered check, and now knight to f3 check, and you lose your queen, right? So what you needed to play was capturing with your queen to keep your king out of that discovered check. And yes, we temporarily lose our battery, but in this case, it's worth it because we got the queen, okay? So that's an example of, we started out with a checkmate threat. We're trying to just go and win the game, but we had to kind of adapt a little bit because of what white was doing, but that's okay. As long as you're getting a big advantage from it, like in this case, the queen, it's worth it. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so here we go. It's white to play, and they play the move bishop to b1, which is a big mistake. What should you play here as black? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is rook takes h3. And the interesting thing about this position is that the pawn is actually pinned to the king. See, this is a good one to remember because a lot of times when you see a pawn like this, you probably just think, oh, it's defended. I can't take it, right? That's kind of how our brains are trained to work. Oh, it's defended by the pawn. I can't take it. Okay. Oh, it's defended by the pawn. I can't take it. Okay. But in this case, that's not true. It's not true because the queen. So whenever there's a king involved and a diagonal piece, it could be a queen, it could be a bishop, lined up on the king, remember that those pawns are pinned, and it opens up opportunities like this. All right, so white's going to move here, and we have one more follow-up move. What should we play next? If you had a chance to look at that, the move is bishop to h2 check, forces the king back. And why did we want to do that? Well, it puts it in line with the rook, and then we can play bishop to g3 check. Remember, this is still pinned now, so it can't take our rook, and we're going to be taking the queen next move like this. Or there's actually a better move if you would like to pause. This one's a little bit more advanced, but I'll go ahead and give you a chance. What should we play? Instead of taking the queen, it's even better. Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is rook to h1 check, sacrificing the rook, forcing the king to take. And the reason we did that is because we actually wanted to clear the path for the queen to deliver the checkmate on h2. So this is another one that's actually pretty common when you're attacking the king and you have an open h-file like this and your rook's involved. Sometimes you want to give up the rook so that it makes way for the queen to come over with check and deliver the mate. All right, because the rook can't deliver mate here because it's not a diagonal piece, right? So giving it up is the way to do it, and so that's a pretty common one as well. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, here we go. White plays the move bishop to b3. What do you play as black? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move here is knight to f4, and it's a simple double attack. We're threatening checkmate here, but if white deals with that, let's just say g3, we're also threatening knight to e2 check, forking the king and the queen. So here's another example of you don't always end up with checkmate, but if you can get something really good like a queen, it's worth it, okay? And white actually can't stop both of those threats at the same time. They could save the queen, but then they simply get checkmated on g2. All right, next one. Okay, black plays the move knight takes d3, attacking your queen. It's white to play. What do you play here? All right, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is queen to g5. This is another pretty common pattern that you want to remember. When you have a pawn this far advanced on your opponent's, in front of their g-pawn when they've castled, if you can ever bring the queen in front, it does two things. Number one, it pins the pawn, so the pawn can't capture you. But number two, it just threatens checkmate. Just threatens checkmate. And it's a really nice one to remember because a lot of times what they will try to do is push by you, but then you can simply hop over to h6, and as long as this is, defended and not going to be captured, which it is, you have another checkmate threat, and there's no way to stop it. Well, I shouldn't say no way. The only way is if black is willing to give up their queen, which, again, we're fine with that, right? We win the queen. But if they don't do that, they play any other move, you're just going to come in here for checkmate, all right? So remember that one as well. Okay, let's go to the next position. They're going to start to get a little bit more difficult now. Okay, this position, white plays the move king to g2, and you can see the king is exposed, but how do we follow up on that? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, there should be two moves that probably come to mind when you're looking at this position, and only one of them is good. Queen to g4 check looks very natural, but that's not the right move, okay? The right move is knight to f4 check. And what's the big difference about these moves? Well, it's a question of what is your follow-up going to be. So this is what you want to always ask yourself when you're calculating. After you're thinking about playing a move, ask yourself, okay, what is the opponent going to do? And what's my follow-up going to be? So like, let's say they go king to h1. What's your follow-up going to be? Are you going to come down here checkmate? Nope, that's well defended. Are you going to go here and fork this guy? Nope, that's defended. You could go here to try to line up, but then it looks like white could probably just play knight to h2 and block you off, and now your queen's under attack. There's not really a good follow-up, right? That's why this is not the move, but knight to f4 check is so much better, because now, where's the king going to go? It doesn't really matter, because a queen to h3 is the kind of the killer follow-up move, regardless of where the king goes. If it goes here, again, queen to h3. If it goes back to h1, again, queen to h3 with check, and there we go with the follow-up, okay? So it's important to look ahead a little bit and make sure you see the follow-up, and if not, keep looking until you can find a better move, okay? All right, let's go to the next one. And white plays the move rook f to c1, lining up on the open file. It's your move as black. What should you play? All right, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is rook takes h3. And again, we're creating the battery, which is very, very powerful. But this situation is a little bit different because the threat on our king. Okay, but what you had to notice here is that even if white goes check, when we come up, we're actually safe. The rook's not going to come here. We'll just take it. The rook can't go here. We'll just take it. The queen can't put us in check. I mean, here, but we'll just take it. The bishop is blocked off. We're actually totally fine. And now white is in trouble. They can't really stop our follow-up threat. So this is an example of sometimes when you're attacking, your king is also going to be in danger, right? And that's just how chess works. Like your opponent's usually not just sitting around not doing anything. They're probably attacking you, right? If you're attacking them, they might be attacking you. And you want to always calculate, can I get to safety and keep my attack going after I get to safety? And if you can, then you want to move forward with the attack, right? A lot of people, I think, might see this and, oh no, I got to start defending. And maybe you start planning to bring your bishop back to block it off or, something else. But you just need to calculate, well, what happens if I let him go there and I move? Looks like I'm pretty safe, right? That's kind of the thought process that you would want to use, okay? Let's go to the next one, and these last three are going to be much more tricky. So here we go. Black plays the move queen to f2. What should you play here as white? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is rook takes g7, opening up the king. And if you were tempted to say something like queen to g6, just trying to go for checkmate like this, it's not a bad idea. But remember, if we go back to the question of what's the follow-up going to be, it's actually pretty easy for black to defend this. Knight takes f5, simply defends, attacks our rook. This is defended, and we don't really have anything, okay? But when we sacrifice the rook, we're immediately threatening checkmate here. And if the king takes us, we can come into g6, and then we take it, right? And it's still checkmate. Now, there's one other try that black has here that I'll give you a chance to see if you can spot. After knight takes f5, what do we play here? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is queen to g6. And it's the only way to kind of sneak into the position and threaten checkmate, because the knight actually does a nice job attacking our rook, defending this pawn. But when we go here, this square, black can't defend it. Okay, the only thing they could do would be to take our rook, but then we simply take this with checkmate. And remember, the bishop is assisting us there. And so that was the solution there. All right, let's go to the next one. I have two more for you, and these last two are much more complicated. All right. So black plays the move rook to b8. It's our turn. What do we play as white? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, so this is a very complicated position because although we have a lot of pieces attacking the king, black actually has a lot of pieces defending, right? He's got the knights and the bishop, and it seems like everything is kind of, defended pretty nicely. So you had to think very carefully about how to break through. And the key was involving these rooks, okay? Involving these rooks and kind of pairing that with the potential of a checkmate on g7. So what do I mean by the potential? Well, if you imagine that these pieces were gone, right? Just magically disappeared, well, this would be checkmate. We would just come down with our queen, right? It's defended by the bishop. You say, but Nelson, there's two pieces there. So how can we, using the other pieces that we have, kind of just leaving these alone maybe for a minute, how can we maybe get rid of these? That's kind of what you want to be thinking about. And the way that you would do that is knight takes g7. Now you're opening up the king this way. Black really has to take you one way or the other, right? But if they take, let's just say with the knight, what do you do now? That's right. You sacrifice your rook, and there's no more piece that can defend this. And yes, the queen, but then you just take it. So that doesn't really help black. And there's nothing else they can do. This is checkmate next move. So do you see how by sacrificing that knight, we ended up eliminating the threat? Now, the other move that you had to consider was what happens if they take with the bishop. So if you'd like to pause, what should you play here? This is kind of a secondary threat that we had lurking in the position. All right, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is rook takes f7. So we kind of switched. We had the idea of the checkmate there, but we also, using the rooks and this bishop, had the idea of taking on f7, which also is a very, very nasty threat because now there's a discover check here on the king. And so after takes, we can come in with the rook again, and we still have this threat. And, I don't know let's see what the best move is. If they play king to h8, we simply have checkmate in 2 because the rook is now assisting the queen. And yeah, there's actually not any good moves for black here. There's no good moves. So that's this is much more difficult. But what I hope you take away from this is pairing tiny little segments of tactics together. Okay, so like the checkmate threat on G7 was one piece of the puzzle. The other piece of the puzzle was, hey, there's a potential, really nice move here if we can get our rook to F7. And it kind of looks tricky because there's so many pieces in the way, but notice how quickly that can change when you do a nice little sacrifice at the right moment. Okay? So, yeah, hopefully that makes sense, and that's how you would win this position. All right, let's go to the last one here. And black plays the move knight takes b2. White to play, what should you play here? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at this one, I'll just go ahead and tell you this one, when I was looking at these ahead of time, tricked me. I thought the move was queen to h6, and I was wrong. That's not the correct move. And I'll go ahead and tell you my logic, and then we'll talk about what the actual solution was. So my logic was, I'm going to go here. I'm going to threaten the checkmate, and the only way that I see that black can stop that is by bringing the rook over. And then what I was going to do is play rook to f4. And my point is I'm threatening to take here. Next move, like let's just say black does some random move. I'm going to take here, and this is checkmate. So that's one threat. And then I didn't really see a good way for black to stop that, and that was my mistake. If you'd like to pause, what is black's best move in this position? There is a way to stop that checkmate. See if you guys can see it. This is what I missed. Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is g5. It attacks the rook, but more importantly, it controls this square where I want it to go. And now I'm just kind of in trouble. And yeah, I can move here, but now black's going to bring this rook up and probably this rook over. And all of a sudden, he's defending. And I don't really have anything because that square, I needed that square for my rook. I don't have it anymore. Okay, so that's what I missed. So what's the best move? Well, the best move is rook to f4 immediately. And it's kind of the same idea. We're kind of, wanting to bring the rook over. But what's the key difference? The key difference is that we are blockading this pawn with our queen, which was kind of one of the key factors. We don't allow that pawn to push forward so that we can get our rook to come over. So now if black tries to do the same thing, we simply bring the rook over, and we're going to go here next, or even just sacrifice and checkmate next, depending on what black does, and there's just no way for them to stop it. So for example, h5, this is just checkmate right away. I don't know what's another move. Like if they just take this, we can simply take and checkmate. Or we could even just go queen h6 and checkmate next move, either like this or just take the pawn. There's lots of checkmates. But the point was that you had to not allow that rook g8, g5 idea, which I missed. So you can see how even in a simple position, right, like where it's like, oh, there's the king, we got a pawn and a queen, let's go checkmate him. You have to be careful, right? If you just quickly play the first move that comes to your mind, you just gave away a winning position. Now you're losing. Just like that. Like it's that, you have to be that precise, okay? So, yeah. Now this is a 2600 rated puzzle, so don't feel bad if you didn't see that, but I'm just pointing out like they can get very, very difficult, okay? So hopefully you saw some of the patterns, some of the ideas when you're attacking the king, some of the things you need to look for, and I'll see you guys next time. As always, stay sharp, play smart, and take care.